Hey everybody, what's up? Welcome back to the channel. Today I'm going to try to make a very quick video. I don't want to say too quick, but I don't want to waste your time and I want to get to it and hopefully give you the information that you need. So today I wanted to talk a little bit about who should buy the MT03 and who the MT03 is for by giving you some kind of helpful tips and some relevant information for you to consider. Okay? So I know that when I was looking at the MT03 and I was really interested in getting this bike, a lot of the content that I watched on YouTube, a lot of the videos that I saw that were talking about this bike, while they weren't completely negative, they were somewhat discouraging, meaning they were kind of like, get this bike instead, or get this other bike, or get this other bike. And so I would be all about the MT03, then they would have me talked out of it, and I would just think, well, I don't want to get a crappy bike, I don't want to get a bike that is wussy or isn't as fun, you know, and it just, I don't know, it was enough negative that it made me think negative. And then it wasn't until I started intentionally looking up information that was created, like content that was created by people who have the MT03, that I started seeing that I needed to look at things that were relevant to me. So it's like going to the movies, guys, okay? You're going to go to the movies with your friends and you're going to watch a horror movie. Now, 3 of you guys love horror movies, so you're like, oh, it's like the best. 2 people don't, and they're terrified, and they probably shouldn't have went to that movie, so they don't like it. So I think you have to be relevant about the information regarding your motorcycle, like what is relevant to you. So I would go and watch content and people would talk about like, oh, it was too tiny. Well, okay, these people were 6 foot tall, 6'2", 6'3", 6'4". One guy was 6'1". I'm not any of those things. I'm 5'4", maybe 5'5". So I'm a short rider. So that's not going to be a relevant issue to me. The seat height is going to be relevant to me, which was not relevant to them. So it being a smaller bike was a bigger deal to them because they felt jam-packed. But it being a smaller bike was more important to me because it meant that I could actually ride it, right? So be relevant with that. But think about what applies to you when you are looking at your motorcycle. So the other thing I would say is just because something is promoted a certain way doesn't mean that that's the only way that you can use it. So the MT03 is oftentimes talked about as being a good commuter bike for the city, which might be true. And there are a few of you guys I think have commented and said oh, I ride my MT03 as like a daily commuter in the city. And that's awesome because it works for you and that's great. And that's just proof that it doesn't work in just one particular way, because I don't live in the city. I live in the country. The roads here are incredibly curvy. They're very steep at times. I don't live near the interstate. I have a 4-lane, which I think most people in the world call a highway, but we call it a 4-lane, which is 2 lanes of traffic going each way, okay? So the average speed limit around here is between 50 and 65. I'm not saying that I follow that. I'm not saying anything about that, guys. We're not going to go there, but I'm just saying that is the speed limit, okay? So I have never had a problem on this motorcycle getting up to speed, merging into traffic, gearing down and getting ahead of traffic to merge in. I've never had a problem of beating someone off the line. I've never had a problem taking twisty roads, curvy roads at speed or even faster. This bike is so lightweight. It loves to be pitched in, and I think that's the same thing that makes it so friendly for the city, is like weaseling in and out of traffic and getting ahead of traffic, and those little narrow streets when you're trying to park this bike and there's not a lot of parking. That's the same thing that makes it fun and useful for where I live as well. So you're talking about 2 completely different environments, 2 completely different situations, and the MT03 works awesome for both of those, okay? So the MT03 is also promoted as a beginner bike. But most of the people on this channel that have the MT03 are not beginner riders. They're people that have had plenty of other motorcycles and they enjoy the MT03. the MT03 is not my first bike either. I've had 5 motorcycles. My first street bike, and I say street bike with, like, you know, you had to have registration and a tag, was the Scram 411. And I had, you know, you had to have a license to drive it on the street. But I've had dirt bikes that I rode on the street, because that's kind of where we live, in the woods, you know what I mean? So that's kind of the hooligan stuff we do here, okay? That's just how we roll. So it's not my first bike, and I still enjoy this bike. I still have an awesome time on this motorcycle, and I've had the pleasure of riding other street bikes, and I just gotta say, like, some of those I thought, okay, they really do have more power. I got to ride a 600 Kawasaki the other day, and I'm like, wow, you know, the power really is different. That's cool. But I was so uncomfortable sitting on that and the sitting position and just like eating the gas tank the whole time that wasn't really my jam. That's not how I wanted to ride. So I was very happy to get back on my little bike. So I'm just going to spit some information out to you, and be mindful that this is the information that makes this bike beginner friendly, but it doesn't have to be just for a beginner. This could be useful for anyone. So the MT03 has a seat height of 30.7 inches, which makes it very friendly for someone who's a beginner or someone who is short, who needs to get their feet on the ground. Because right when you first start out riding a motorcycle, you might be a little timid, you might be a little nervous. So being able to get your feet down and feel like you have control over this motorcycle when you're probably more likely to make some of those little mistakes in the beginning, it's natural. That makes sense, right? But what if you're someone that's shorter, and being able to get some part of your foot down when you stop at a red light is pretty relevant. So that is what makes the MT03 relevant to anybody who needs a lower seat height. So just for comparison, if you're not sure like what height seat that you need, or seat height, I said that backwards, go to a dealership and sit on a motorcycle and really feel it out. Like, feel how heavy this bike is. Feel how tall this is. How does your feet feel positioned here? That kickstand's going to hold you up. So you put that kickstand down and sit on that bike and put your feet on the pegs and just sit on it and be like, oh, is this comfortable or not? You know, check it out. And I'm going to say do that with any motorcycle that you're on. Like, really vibe it out and try to imagine yourself riding this bike. Then when you're in the dealership, you lean that sucker over and you put the kickstand up and you put your feet down and say, oh wow, I can't touch, so I probably need something a little lower. And then you pull that phone out of your pocket and you say, how tall is this bike? And then you get kind of a viewpoint. So I'm going to give you a little example. So I was interested in the MT03, and then I got kind of talked out of it and started looking at the KTM Duke 390, right? So when I went and sat on the KTM Duke 390, I could not touch at all. And I was like, oh, even the small bikes, too small or too big for me. That's sad. So then when I came home and I actually did some research, the KTM Duke 390, the seat height is 32.3 inches. Okay? So just for reference, the motorcycle that I had at my house at the time, which we still have and my husband rides it, is the Scram 411, which you will see all over this channel. The Scram sits at 31.3 inches in seat height. So this other bike sits at 32.3. I can barely touch on the Scram. So I already knew off the bat that the KTM Duke 390 was going to be a no-go for me, because if it's bigger than the Scram and I can barely touch on the Scram, then I'm going to have a hard time. So then I went back to the MT03, because the MT03 has a seat height of 30.7. So as someone who is 5'4", around 5'5", I can sit on this bike very comfortably. When you go and you look at, I think the average height for an American male is around 5'8" or 5'9". Okay, so most people aren't 6'3". This bike is going to be suited for most people just fine. I will also read things where people will be like, the MT03 is for women. I'm just going to go ahead and say, I have yet to meet a woman who rides this motorcycle. I have not. I don't know where they are. I would love to meet them. So ladies, if you ride this bike, please subscribe, comment, talk to me, because like everybody I know who rides this motorcycle is a guy. So fellas, if you know you're nervous about your bros giving you a hard time about riding the girl's bike, just go ahead and tell them, I know girls on this bike. In fact, most of the women I see ride are riding Harleys and the kind of glider bikes. So, just saying. So, then maybe the weight of the bike is relevant to you, okay? So, the MT03, the starting weight for the MT03 is 373 pounds. I think that's before gas, so you're going to put a little gas in it. It's going to be a little bit heavier. Such a lightweight bike, guys. So the other bike that we have, the Scram, is 432 pounds. And I can just tell you, moving it around in this driveway, so we have this gravel driveway, you know, here's the Scram. Trying to move this bike around is so much easier. Like, it's crazy easy. Like, I don't know how to explain it to you, but like our driveway is all gravel here, and then it's kind of paved to the side that you can't see, and just moving it around, it's like a joy, guys. It's so nice. It's so smooth. Like, I can move the Scram by myself. I've ridden the Scram. You know, my husband didn't even have a license. I was the one riding the Scram, and I moved that bike around by myself, but bro, I had to put a lot of work into it. Like, you know, you ponder on that. You know, I'm 5'5", and I'm trying to move 432 pounds by myself. Now, I could do it, and I did it, but I had to put a lot of little work into it. And just the difference in moving these bikes is just night and day. And my husband makes a comment about it every time. Every time he moves my bike, he's like, oh my gosh, your bike is just so light. So if you're someone where you don't want a big heavy bike and you're trying to move it around and you're like, I got to do that by myself and I don't have somebody to help me, like, that's going to be relevant to you, right? I have a friend who has a Harley, and he was complaining to me about how heavy it was to move his Harley around. So he's actually, I think he's going to get rid of his Harley, because he said it is not made for riding around this area. He's like, yeah, it does great, you know, on the highway, the 4-lane, as I call it. He's like, it does great for that, but when he gets on the back roads, it's not, because again, back roads got some sketchy little things like this, guys, where these little, like, curbs up in the pavement, some of those things are like 3-4 inches higher than the rest of the pavement. So when I am navigating those, like, I'm paying attention, they're coming up ahead and I see them, I can actually stand on my foot pegs on my MT03 like I would a dirt bike, and I kind of handle it like a dirt bike. When I go over train tracks, I kind of handle that like a dirt bike, and he can't do that because he's got those kind of those front facing pegs. You know, the pegs are like way up near the front tire. So he was telling me a story the other day about how I think it was Labor Day, maybe, he was riding around and he went over some train tracks and it bottomed out and about threw him off, and he's like, I drag every time I take these curves up through here, and that is what most of this area is. It's kind of like riding the back of the dragon. And so I always kind of think that's fun when people are like, oh, the dragon, all these curves, you know, but that's where I've started out riding. You know, this is the mountains is where I've learned, and so for me, I feel pretty confident that I could go and handle the dragon. One sec, I think my neighbor might be about to turn. 1 second, guys. Okay, that's some kind of maintenance truck. I think they're going to do some work up here, so let me try to spit this out really quickly before it gets crazy out here. So I will also say the MT03 MSRP is like $4,999. With taxes and shipping and freight, you're going to pay more than that. But essentially, you're getting a brand new bike out of the dealer, you know, around the 5,000-ish mark, which is just a steal any day of the week. It's a tremendous little bike. I've enjoyed riding it. And so that's just what I'm going to encourage you when looking at a bike, looking at the kind of bike you want to ride. Just be honest with yourself. You know, if you want to go 200 miles an hour on the freeway, then you need a bike that can do that, right? If you want to have a bike that it's got some power and you can zip around and you can have fun, but it's lightweight and it's awesome on gas and has a low seat height, and you want that kind of sport bike look, because you know the MT03 does have that kind of like, it's got that sporty, aggressive look without the insurance part of it as well. That's another thing you got to consider, is like the insurance for my MT03 with a smaller engine compared to the Scram 411, which is made for scrambling and off-road, and usually things that can do off-road stuff can be a little more pricey because they're expecting you to go do some sketchy things, was $100 more than the Scram. Okay, and that was through Progressive. So that's something else to think about. You know, some of these bigger engine, like sporty looking bikes, you're not just going to pay for the price of getting them, you're going to pay for the price of the insurance as well. And I think, you know, money's tight for most people nowadays, and I think all of that is relevant. So just use your smarts, think about your situation, think about what you specifically want out of your bike. What is it, you know, if you're going to put the money into getting a bike that you want to ride and you want to love it, then I'm just going to tell you, get the one you want, guys. Get the one that you really want. Don't let no one talk you out of it, or anyone talk you out of it, and just get it, because at the end of the day, you're the one that's riding it. You're the one that has to pay for it, right? So it's really not anybody else's business, and just be honest with yourself. You want to go do track days, then you probably need a bike that's suited for track days, right? You want to do felony speeds on the interstate, go for it. I mean, some of us don't. You know, I don't want to die. I don't want to kill nobody else. And I don't want to go to jail. I'm not made for jail. I'm just going to be honest with you. I'm not trying to fight no lady over a honey bun, okay? I'm just going to be honest. I ain't got time for that. I got stuff to do. So jail's not the place for me. So I'm not going to do that. I'm going to keep my danger within reasonable limits. All right, guys. Well, thanks for stopping by the channel. As always, I appreciate you. I appreciate you hanging in there with me and for watching this content and for supporting and encouraging this channel. I hope you guys have a wonderful week. If you do buy an MT03, let me know. Actually, just whatever you buy, tell me. If you're a new rider and you got a bike, let me know. I'm curious about what everybody likes. I'm not going to lie, I was digging the Rebel 500 for a hot minute. But there's just something about this MT03, guys. I just love it, and I just couldn't take my eyes off of it. Just kind of love at first sight kind of thing. So just let me know you're here. I love to hear about what people like in a motorcycle and what they're kind of looking for, because I always think that's interesting because it kind of matches people's personalities. But I hope you guys have a wonderful week. Ride safe, and we'll see you next time.